currently 62. Your next news update is at 8. And Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560. The Answer.
From the Matrix Home Solutions studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Listen to AM 560 The Answer online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, and on TuneIn, iHeart, and on Odyssey. Only the biggest stories, only the biggest guests, and only the biggest opinions. This is AM 560 The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan, and in for Amy J this morning, former Chicago Tribune columnist John Cass. You can find his work now at johncassnews.com. And his podcast, The Chicago Way, there as well.
Thanks, Danny.
And Tony Fauci, the good doctor, was on this week. Clinton Foundation Donor Zero had the week off, so Jonathan Kroll sat in. He's at least a little bit more responsible. And this is what Fauci had to say to the question of the prospect that a lockdown may be in the offing. Is that at least
federal lockdown?
Well, the recommended lockdown, and then, of course, everybody dutifully complies, or most everybody does. The reporting has been that this is certainly a topic that they haven't ruled out. Here's what Fauci had to say.
John, I don't think we're going to see lockdowns. I think we have enough of the percentage of people in the country, not enough to crush the outbreak, but I believe enough to not allow us to get into the situation we were in last winter.
Well, it's interesting because Dr. Rochelle Walensky, CDC director, on with Brett Baer on Friday night, was asked the question about fall sports. Are we going to have an NFL season, for example? Here's what she said.
I mean, are we going to have an NFL season, an NHL season, an NBA season?
I am really hopeful that we will. What I think is really clear is that if we unify together as a country, if we take the steps that are necessary to squash the amount of disease that is there now, we can do so in a matter of weeks.
Obey.
I hope so. That sounds like somebody who's part of conversations where things like postponing, delaying, locking down is still on the table.
Mom, can I have a dog? Can I have a puppy? I hope so. It depends on you, John.
Yeah. Well, it depends on you, along with the neighborhood, coming together in unity to raise the dog. It takes a village.
Support the January 6th Commission and to support motor voting, of course.
For more on this, as well as Trump's presidential predilections, we're pleased to be joined again by Andy Kroll, who's the Washington, D.C. bureau chief for Rolling Stone magazine. Andy, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning.
So what is the temperature on the Hill about CDC, basically Walensky, Fauci, and Collins, this weekly Sunday talkie show that they do on those shows, and the quality of their messaging, the policy reversals, and the quality of their answers to questions like lockdown. Is that sitting well with members of Congress, particularly on the Democrat side, who may be more fearful about the midterms?
I mean, it's an ongoing headache among the Democrats that I've talked to about the changing communications and messaging coming out of CDC. And this is something that's been going on for more than just this administration, going back into the last one too, but it's specific to the CDC. It's about masks, it's lockdowns, it's you're free to live your life as we learned in May, and now we're pulling it back. I think it's also, there's a lot of frustration about even going just to last Friday when the CDC released this data out of Massachusetts about an outbreak up there, that the CDC sort of hyped the scariest part of this data, which was that breakthrough infections do happen, but did not really play up both the fact that almost no one was seriously ill. I think the hospitalizations were in the single digits, and they were mild at worst, and that the vaccines work, which is the vaccines prevent an infection from being, really dangerous or deadly. And the CDC instead says, these breakthrough infections are happening. And so there's frustration about that as well. I will tell you, though, Dan, there is, from the folks that I talk to, little to zero appetite for more lockdowns. No one wants to do that. No one wants to hear that in their states. Obviously, members of Congress, the administration can't really do that. That's up to governors, state legislatures, local officials in the counties. But no one wants to do that at this point. No one wants to shut the economy down again. And they're going to look at every tool that they have to try to get this most recent spike under control without seeing what we saw during 2020.
Well, that's so interesting. On the one hand, the problem they have with the Provincetown case study is that they've changed the metric to cases, so they can't mention, but don't worry, because the 74% of people that were vaccinated in this cohort that were infected, they're not seriously ill, they're not hospitalized, they're not going to die. They can't say that because cases is all we're supposed to care about today. We're not looking at hospitalizations and deaths the way that we did at the beginning of the outbreak last year. And the other thing too is, there's no appetite for lockdowns on the left. That's so interesting because to hear those who moved to lockdown tell the story, it was the only choice they had. It was a wonderful choice. It was the right choice, and they defend that choice. So if it was the right choice last year and they're engaged in hysteria over Delta this year, like Rochelle Walensky, then why wouldn't it be the right choice again?
I think the vaccine situation is obviously different. I mean, the fact that we have half the country of all ages vaccinated, that's a different state of things than what we had in the middle of 2020 when the lockdowns first came around. I mean, I think obviously there's going to be some criticism of the stance toward lockdowns now compared to last year. I mean, I think obviously a year's worth of data, a year's worth of getting people vaccinated, or 6 months worth of getting people vaccinated really changes the picture quite a bit. But having lived through the lockdowns, having seen people's reaction, having seen the effect on the economy that one time last year, I don't hear any appetite, even though you still have Dr. Fauci not totally taking it off the proverbial table. I don't hear any appetite to go back to that.
What about
to go back to that measure?
Yeah, and what about concerns about schools too? Because I mean, I don't know. I think the appetite is a lot less for 2-year-olds and up to be masked at school than it was last year too. But that's the position CDC has taken.
Yeah, it is. There's no appetite at all to continue virtual learning and to deny students, the youngest ages on up, the ability to go into school, to not only get their education, but to get that critical sort of social interaction with their peers. I mean, I personally think, and when I talk to elected officials, political consultants outside the Beltway in places like Wisconsin, Minnesota, Colorado, other states that are not getting the DC coverage all the time, school lockdowns, or the potential of school lockdowns, is a huge issue, a political issue, and I think it's one that Democrats are nervous about. They were really nervous about it last year, very nervous about it this year, and I think they recognize that you're going to get a revolt in a lot of these suburbs where President Biden sort of overperformed and really helped him win the presidency if you try to do this halfway, half virtual, half in person. And I think there is every effort underway to try to get kids back in school full time when the school year starts. But there's not that much time to do that. I mean, it's August 2nd right now. School year's starting up in a month or so. So maybe even less in some places. So I think that August is a really important month to try to get that figured out, so that in-person school is the only option.
Andy, this is John Cass. I'm wondering, how do you think the national press will cover that tension that you just mentioned between the national teachers unions and the Democratic office seekers? How's that going to play out, do you think? Is it there, because the last time it was all wrapped up in virtue signaling and hysteria and fear and what's best for the children, and clearly now, as you mentioned, parents are not all on board. So how do you think the national media will be approaching it?
What I think, John, and what I hope, and it's really something I'm thinking about personally too, is that national reporters get out to these cities, these suburbs, these states, where this debate, in some cases a pretty fierce debate, is playing out on the ground, right in front of you, where maybe a local union, a local teachers union affiliate of one of the two big national ones, is wrestling with, its teachers are wrestling with, its reps are wrestling with what do we do and what's best for our students, and also what are the political ramifications for the state legislature, the national politics, by say going back half virtual, half in person, or going back full in person, or some kind of mask policy for students, because there's an argument that the public health backs that up, and there's an argument that it doesn't, and there's data that says that it doesn't, and that it also gets in the way of a real education setting environment. In Washington, I think there is a tension, but there are tight lips among senior Democrats who know how important the teachers union is to them.
Exactly.
Both boots on the ground, but financially, of course. I mean, big labor
There's shock troops,
a huge funding part.
Well, but that's the
wouldn't go that far.
Well, but here's the thing. Wait a second. Biden last week said, still looking at federal vaccine mandate, but certainly states and localities, businesses, private entities, I'd like to see you go in that direction. That was essentially intimated by Rochelle Walensky in her interview with Brett Barron Friday night. And yet the flight attendants union, the pilots union, no vaccine mandate, the Randy Weingarten, at the national level, local big unions, teachers unions like Chicago, no vaccine mandates. They're opposed to vaccine mandates. So President Biden, how do you square that with what you're suggesting and what your allies are doing? You're not reading from the same hymnal here, are you?
You can't square it. And there's going to be a lot of pressure behind the scenes, and it's going to be behind the scenes unless those conversations break down and it has to go public, to try to get those allies to get on board with, as you put it, Walmart, Disney, the Pentagon, the vast federal bureaucracy, all the employees there who are now either getting vaccinated or facing a pretty onerous testing regime. I mean, the Biden administration doesn't want, and I don't really think that they can, go forward with a nationwide vaccine mandate. Everyone gets it, fiat from on high. They are going to look through private employers, through the federal government, through hopefully teachers unions as well, to try to, press people through there to get the vaccine numbers up. I think it'll definitely work with private businesses. It'll definitely work with the federal government. But if you're going to be an ally and you're going to want things like a teacher union would from the Biden administration, the education department, and so on, they're going to get pressure from them in turn to try to get on board with these vaccine requirements as well. There's no doubt about it. It's just a matter of time, I think. And again, with the school year starting soon, there isn't much of that time left.
You reported for Rolling Stone that President Trump is talking to confidants. That was reported again over the weekend, informal quote-unquote cabinet meeting. Mark Meadows talked about it, his former chief of staff, that he has made the decision that he's going to run again. At least he's going to run again as of right now.
I want to be clear, too. I did not go looking for this piece of Trump-related news when I started reporting the story. As a reporter, I check in with all kinds of people all the time. And, this was a little bit ago, a couple of weeks or so ago, and I just started hearing from my folks in Trump world. He's telling people he wants to do it. He obviously told Sean Hannity in a town hall meeting that he had made up his mind. Didn't say what he'd made up his mind to do.
Right.
He said he'd made up his mind. But what I've been hearing from everyone is that, he wants to do it. He wants to get back in. He's obviously raised a ton of money. He's got, I reported back then he had about $85 million on hand at the end of April, but I think it's over.
It's like
102
million.
Like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
102 million. So, I mean, that by the way, is off the charts. That is unprecedented. That is vastly more than he had at this point in his first year of his first term. So he has the money to do it. He clearly has the shadow cabinet ready to go as well. Could change his mind, of course. Anything is possible. There's always, there's plenty of time for 2024. So this is what we're hearing now.
Given the Democrat policy positions tanking in the polls, from border to masks to, I don't know, critical race theory, all of it. Do the Democrats see Trump as their savior?
Not the ones that I talk to, John.
Really? They don't see him as a way to rally the troops in what Dan and I call the Chardonnay Antifa in the suburbs, to get them, have the bogeyman, the orange-haired bogeyman out there, and scare them back into the fold for the midterms.
That I don't totally disagree with. I think that there is clearly a coalition, that President Biden put together in 2020 that did include a lot of growth in the suburbs. But the flip side of that is, sitting here today, whoever comes out of the Republican 2024 primary, and obviously I feel a little saying even saying those words here in 2021, but whatever, that person is going to have to be, if not Donald Trump, someone in his mold. That is where the party is right now, and if the party stays there come the first half of 2024, whoever comes out of that primary process wins the nomination is going to be someone in his mold if it's not him. But if it's not him, that person doesn't have the celebrity, the track record, the star power, pure wattage that Trump himself does, Ron DeSantis or Kristi Noem. I mean, these are people who are trying to, catch that wake and trying to build their own profiles, maybe with an eye toward 2024 if Donald Trump, say, doesn't run. But no one can match what he can do. I mean, he got 74 million people to vote for him in 2020. So I still think there is more of a fear there right now than there is, let him run again and we'll just do what we did in 2020.
He is Andy Kroll, D.C. Bureau Chief for Rolling Stone Magazine. Andy, thanks as always for joining us. Appreciate
Thanks,
it.
Andy.
Always a pleasure.
Thank you. He joined us on the Turnkey.Pro answer line.
It's what Chicago is talking about. It's Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy on AM 560. The Answer.
Balance of Nature's fruits and